When I was a kid, my all-time favorite film series was James Bond. I wanted to be a spy. I didn't care about Star Wars, and I realized that being an adventurer like Indiana Jones was a very interesting but a dirty job. Every time a James Bond movie was on television, I watched it. So I must have seen most of them a dozen of times. The films were always excellent, but the corresponding games, except for GoldenEye, were not so interesting. They were typically movie games, so I never really paid attention to them. Until recently, when I found out that there's one game based on a Bond movie that never came out, with an original story, the original cast and scriptwriter. James Bond 007 Bloodstone from 2010. Does this game still hold up? Is it worth playing more than 7 years after its release? That's what I'm going to find out. Bloodstone takes place sometimes after the film and game Quantum of Solace, when Bond tries to prevent a terrorist attack on a G20 meeting in Athens. After the mission was completed, more or less successful, he slowly decovers a whole network of criminals that is stealing and selling weapons of mass destruction to the highest bidder, slowly going from the small fish to the big kahuna. The story is a typical James Bond affair, traveling to Athens, Istanbul, Monaco, Siberia, Bangkok, and the jungle somewhere in the southeast of Asia. There are Russian and Chinese villains, his boss M appears, and of course halfway the story he encounters a lovely lady to assist him, this time in the form of Nicole Hunter, played by Joss Stone. Another typical Bond trope, his trusty Walther P99 is back as well, and he uses it a lot. Most of the game plays as a third-person shooter, not in the form of Gears of War, but more like Uncharted 1. Actually, the gameplay really reminded me of the first Uncharted game, with the Max Payne-like slow motion mechanic added, for better and for worse. The second part of the gameplay are the chase scenes. The developer Bizarre Creations are mostly known for their Project Gotham Racing series, and yes, this is very clear in the driving sections of the game. The cars handle more or less the same as in the racing games previously mentioned. It's always a bit tricky to judge the graphics of an old game, especially when the characters are supposed to look lifelike, because, well, they're not. The models are done quite okay, I think, but for 2018 they're pretty ugly. The rest of the game looks good enough to be playable, but not more than that. If I would compare the graphics with Uncharted 1, I would say that Uncharted is a much prettier game. Bloodstone has a strange film grain, and I'm not sure if I like it. The animations on the other hand are a mixed bag, with some of them done actually really nicely. They're obviously motion captured, but other times the animation is choppy and feels like you're playing a Nintendo 64 game. The sounds are fine, and the soundtrack is actually very enjoyable, very authentic Bond. One thing that really disappointed me was the voice acting. As mentioned before, the voices are from the real actors such as Daniel Craig, Judi Dench and Joss Stone, and some lesser known voice actors for the side characters. This seems great, so I had big expectations. The results are pretty bad though. Especially Joss Stone sounds like she really had to be somewhere else and wanted to leave the studio as soon as possible. A real shame, even for that time. Remember, Uncharted 2 was already out at this time.
Nice to see you, 007. I was worried that you wouldn't make it in time.
So what can you tell me about Pomerov?
Ugh, he's such a lech. But he's kind of sweet for your basic Russian oligarch. He owns oil wells, diamond mines, and his own 737 with gold-plated fittings, of course.
How do you know him?
Sweetie, there are only 6 people worth dating in the world, and I've probably gone out with half of them. Turn here.
I guess you can see where this review is going. The graphics are a mixed bag, the voices are crap, maybe the gameplay can save this game? Well, not really. Remember those chase scenes I mentioned? They feel like a driving game, and this does not work. Why? Well, your goal here is not the same as in a racing game. You're not supposed to overtake a car and end in first place. No, in all of these scenes, you must keep up with the car or boat you chase until a cutscene will end this section. Good driving isn't really rewarded, and this feels so sloppy. I really didn't like this part of the game. The shooting sections are better, though a bit bland. The shooting itself is often not so precise, and this sucks. Apart from one section where you are trapped in a room and you must fight against a couple of hordes of enemies, it's pretty easy as well. Easier than the chase sections anyway. Then what about the story? Well, it managed to surprise me twice. First of all, how bland the cliché Bond it all is. I hoped it would have a twist or something, but no, it was all very predictable. Until the end. There's a double plot twist in the end that I didn't see coming, and it kind of hints on a sequel, which obviously never arrived. This is something that was done in the older Bond movies as well, but I didn't see it coming. Then the last, a bit minor complaint is the lack of gadgets in Bloodstone. I hoped there would be more than just guns and cars in this game, but nope, it's just running, hiding, shooting, and driving. But I still finished the game, twice even, and actually I enjoyed playing it. The simplistic cover shooting is just fun, the locations are varied enough and transition very smoothly. Like the first Uncharted game, it feels dated, but sometimes it is perfectly fine. It really feels like a Bond game, and this was enough for me. When I decided on playing Bloodstone, I knew what I was stepping into. This game didn't get a very high score even in 2010. And I must say, it aged poorly. There are much better games on the PlayStation 3. On the other hand, it is worth a playthrough when you are a fan of James Bond. It made me curious about the other PS3 game that came out in the same time and which got much better reviews. GoldenEye. Just to compare them. Is it worth playing for a non-Bond fan? No, not really. Stick with Uncharted if you want a third-person cover shooter. Or go for something more deep like Deus Ex Human Revolution. So, my conclusion is that if you are in for a Bond game with an original story, and if you don't mind to play old games, Bloodstone is worth checking out. Otherwise, just leave it. So, this was my review for James Bond 007 Bloodstone. Oof, those driving sections were tough and annoying. And yes, I know there is another Bond game not based on a movie, Everything or Nothing on the original Xbox. Maybe I will take a look at it some other time. Anyway, did you play Bloodstone? What did you think of it? I'm curious about it, so let me know in the comments. Please subscribe and give me a like if you like this video. And see you soon for the next review. Ciao!